We got
An idea.
what idea?
An idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing. Right. Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
Hello and welcome to A Lot of Nothing. Today I'm going to be talking about the way in which I believe they're going to discover how to defeat the Night King. Something I think Gilly is going to reveal, but it's more than that. There are a few reasons as to why I think Gilly being the one to tell the gang about Azor Ahai, or just telling Sam, and then having him relay that information is quintessential Game of Thrones. So by now, I'm sure some or most of you are aware that Gilly last season, while sitting next to Sam, was reading about the Azor Ahai prophecy, all while Sam notated his daily duties. Is it possible she already told Sam about this already? Of course it is. I just don't think that they would leave that type of revelation to happen off screen, which is where my prediction comes in. I believe in the next episode, Gilly possibly overhears them talking about the Night King coming and how they're going to defeat him, and when she does, reveals what she has learned. At which point, I think Sam will put the rest together much like he did when Gilly read aloud the annulment for Rhaegar and the secret ceremony in Dorne.
This High Septon Maynard, he recorded everything. He even recorded his own bowel movements. What does annulment mean?
It's when a man sets aside his lawful wife.
Maynard says here that he issued an annulment for Prince Rhaegar and remarried him to someone else at the same time in a secret ceremony in Dorne. Is that a common thing in the South?
These maesters, they set me to the task of preserving that man's wind accounting and annulments and bowel movements for all eternity, while the secret to defeating the Night King's probably sitting on some dusty shelf somewhere, completely ignored. Oh, but that's all right, isn't it? We can all become slavering, murderous imbeciles enthralled to evil incarnate as long as we can have access to the full records of High Septon Maynard's 15,782 shits!
Steps. That number was the steps.
Pay attention to what Sam says there. The secret to defeating the Night King is probably sitting on some dusty shelf somewhere. That is some atypical Game of Thrones foreshadowing right there. Okay, so right after I thought about this, I was thinking about how this would be the story coming full circle, or rather how this would be a callback, and I couldn't quite recall who taught Gilly how to read. So I used my good old friend Google, and when I saw Shireen, my eyes just lit up. Almost like little Ned Umber did. Too soon? Maybe. Anyways, being that Shireen taught Gilly how to read, and that she was sacrificed by Melisandre in her quest to prove that Stannis was the prince who was promised, or Azor Ahai, if you will, I would find it very poetic if Gilly was the one who tells the group about Azor Ahai, which involves, of course, sacrificing Nissa, who I believe to be Melisandre. I'm not going to go into all the evidence because then this video would be 40 minutes long at least. But in Clash of the Kings, in Davos' first POV chapter of that book, we learn about Nissa. Quote, Nissa, he said to her, for that was her name, bare your breasts. She did this thing, why I cannot say, and Azor Ahai thrust the smoking sword through her living heart. It is said that her cry of anguish and ecstasy left a crack across the face of the moon. End quote. We could dissect every line of that paragraph, but once again, for the sake of time, we're just going to cover a couple. First, let us cover the easiest one. Quote, the living heart. End quote. Melisandre's banner is literally a burning heart, and in the book specifically, A Storm of Swords, in Davos' second POV chapter, he confronts Melisandre after the Battle of Blackwater and says, quote, I will cut the living heart from her breast and see how it burns. End quote. See how it burns. Interesting choice of words, meant to be ambiguous, but I take it as some foreshadowing for Jon's flaming sword catching her heart ablaze. It's also worth noting that they left this line out of the show. As to why they kept that line out of the show, it could be as simple as to them it meant nothing. It could confuse the audience, could have made Davos seem less lovable. There are many reasons, and I'll let you decide.
What I told your son is true. Death by fire is the purest death.
This woman is evil! She's a mother of demons!
Take him to the dungeon, lock him in a cell.
Your grace! Come on!
You've chosen the darkness, Sir Devil.
You will destroy us all!
I will pray for you.
Your grace!
As far as the smoking sword goes, in the Storm of Swords, in John 11th POV chapter, when he and Melisandre are taking the elevator up the wall after she's talking about how she has a fire burning in her, John thinks to himself, quote, "In the close confines of the iron cage, he was acutely aware of the Red Woman's presence. She smells red. The scent reminded him of Mycon's forge, of the way iron smelled when red hot. The scent was smoke and blood. Kissed by fire, he thought." End quote. Now, if it had only been smoke, I think this wouldn't mean as much, but the fact that he smells blood as well, I believe this is more foreshadowing for when John thrusts his blade into her bare breast, fulfilling the prophecy and ending the long night.
You're not cold, my lady.
Never. The Lord's fire lives within me, Jon Snow. Feel. Are you a virgin?
No.
Good.
Here we can see her talking about how she's never cold. A side note, watching that scene again and the look she gives John and then asks him if he's a virgin, man, that shit gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Lord of Light, show us the way!
Mother, please! Mother, please! Mother! Mother!
I can't. There's no other way. She's king's blood.
Please,
Lord of Light, protect us!
please!
For
Mother!
the night is dark and full of terrors!
Mother, please! Mother! Mother, don't do this! Please! Mother, no! Please! Please help! Don't do this! Please, Mother! Mother, help! Please! Don't do this! Don't do this! Please, Mother! Please, Mother! Mother, help! Mother, help! Help! Please don't do this, Mother! Please! Please, Mother, please! Please, no! Please, no!
Man, that scene doesn't get any easier to watch, but the impact that moment has had on the show has not been forgotten by fans, and I think more importantly, not by Dan and David either. Okay, now that our little detour is done, hopefully you can start to see why I think if it is Shireen who taught Gilly to read, and then she happens to be the one to subsequently tell everyone how to save the living, and it involves sacrificing Melisandre, well, that would be some poetic justice, if ever there were any at all. On top of all that, Gilly was the last Craster wife, whom we know about, to give birth to a baby boy. A boy who was supposed to be sacrificed to the Night King, and Sam fighting so hard to save Gilly, all those women in Craster's Keep would make even more sense. Of course, it could be as simple as Sam was just a nice guy and had never been with a woman before. Both are true, and maybe I'm putting too much faith into Dan and David. Either way, it should be interesting. Last thing, HBO released some new screenshots from Sunday's episode, and 2 of them involve Gilly. Here we see her by herself, appearing to be talking to someone, and then in the second one, she's laying with Sam and little Sam. Possibly pillow talk about how to save the living? Maybe. Either way, I for one am looking forward to Sunday's episode. The first episode felt like a prologue, and I enjoyed it, but I think this Sunday we're going to get quintessential Game of Thrones. And of course, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. this is my very first like Game of Thrones mashup where I'm using clips and audio and images, so let me know what you guys think. Critiques are welcome. And again, you guys have a good one, and I'll see you next time.